Carlos felt like he had a decision to make, and there appeared to be only two options before him. The problem was, none of those options appeared to be the right choice. No matter what he decided, it wasn't going to end the way he wanted. Have you ever been in a situation where there doesn't seem like any good options? That's where Carlos was when we met him. I was part of a small group of 11 people from Canada who had ventured down to El Salvador to invest a week's worth of time building houses with Shelter Canada. Carlos is 26 years old and lives with his 23-year-old wife, Jenny, and their 2-year-old daughter, Giselle, in the community of Dos Quebradas. Dos Quebradas is a small community nestled amongst the trees overlooking the larger town of San Vicente. It's a poor community filled with hard-working people just trying to provide for their families. Carlos and Jenny are no exception. In the week that we were there, we didn't get to spend a lot of time with Carlos. Typically, those that are receiving houses are with us all week, helping to build the other houses in addition to their own. But Carlos's employer wouldn't give him the week off. Jobs are not easy to come by in El Salvador, and Carlos has a good job loading trucks, but he was only able to get one day off, the day his house was being built. Carlos works 7 days a week from 8 till 6, loading trucks in the nearby town of San Vicente. In exchange for his 70 hours of back-breaking work each week, he earns $90. Jenny is a homemaker and stays home raising their daughter. During the week, Jenny was with us every step of the way, helping move dirt, assembling the houses, and screwing on the laminate siding. I can clearly picture a time when Jenny was standing on a ladder, reaching above her head to screw on some of the laminate wall material on a neighbor's house. As I watched her working away, I noticed half a dozen able-bodied men standing there watching her work. That's the kind of worker she is. She clearly is not scared of work, and she put many of us to shame. Most especially me, probably. One of the conditions of receiving a house from Shelter is that the homeowner must have the site prepared and leveled. It was around noon and our team had finished building one house that morning for another family, and a few of us went up to check out our next building site. We were excited to hike a short distance up the hill to a beautifully shaded site. Trust me, when it's over 30 degrees Celsius and the sun beats down on you, you learn to look for the shade. After I stood there admiring the trees and the shade, I started looking at the building site. The first thing I look for is how hard the ground is, hoping for some nice soft soil to dig the foundation holes for the house. The ground here wasn't soft, but I've seen harder, so I wasn't too worried. Then my brain finally kicked in and said, "Dummy, remember how you walked halfway up a hill to this site? You're still on a hill, so take a look at how much dirt has been moved out here to level the ground." As I stood looking up at the hill, there was probably about a 6-foot wall that had been created digging out the dirt. And the dirt wasn't moved with a bobcat or an excavator. This was done by hand with a shovel and a pick. I couldn't imagine how long this must have taken, but I was going to find out soon and get another little surprise. Remember earlier I mentioned that we'd dig some holes for the foundation of the house? After I had surveyed the site, it seemed like such a small task compared to the immense amount of work it was to level the site. Many of us started digging the holes, and a short while later I was distracted by something that was happening near where the back holes were being dug. Someone had come across a rock located right where one of the supporting doorposts needed to go. And this was no little rock. They kept working to uncover it, and it became evident that they were not going to be able to dig this one out. No sooner had I come to this realization, and then Carlos comes running in with a large hammer drill and extension cord. Now, I've been down with Shelter many times and seen a lot of things while building houses, but this I'd never seen before. I'm thinking, how does he have a hammer drill? And what is he going to do with it? This is going to get interesting. Remember I talked about hardworking people? Well, Carlos spent the next at least 45 minutes working to split the rock. He drilled it in several places. He took a steel wedge and hammered it into the hole. He worked at it until he finally split the rock. As I stood there watching, it quickly became evident to me that Carlos had done this before, and I started to wonder how many rocks he had hit when he was leveling the land. I wandered over to the edge of his property and looked down the hill to see a pile of rocks that had been split. And a little later on, I found another, even larger pile of rocks that had also been split and moved. When I initially stood in the shade of the trees on this nicely leveled site on the hill, I was completely oblivious to the amount of work that had been done to make this happen. After we finished building the house, we liked to sit down with the family and talk with them. Of course, now seeing what we had just gone through, we wanted to know about the work that had gone into leveling the land. Carlos Yenny and his dad had worked for a month to get the site prepared for the new house. Carlos would get home after work around 6:30, and the three of them would work until 2 a.m., shoveling dirt, breaking and hauling the rocks away. So what are the two bad choices that Carlos was facing? Carlos was working long days at a decent job, and yet he wasn't able to provide a safe, reliable house for his family. No man wants to go to bed each night knowing that his family is not protected from the rain or from strangers coming into their home. He wanted his family to live better than he was currently able to provide, so he was planning on trying to illegally move to the US and get work there. He didn't want to leave, but continuing down the same path they were on wasn't going to change anything, so he had to decide: stay with my family and continue to live like this, or leave my family, try to get to the US and send back money every month so that they can have a better life. Unfortunately, we generally know how this story ends. Trying to get into the US is expensive and extremely dangerous. If Carlos made it into the US alive, I'm sure he would have found someone who would illegally hire him. He probably would have been taken advantage of financially, but he would have sent back money to his family. After a while though, as memory fades, it would be easy to get used to a better life. You don't see your family, you meet someone else, and eventually Jenny and Giselle are left in El Salvador to try and fend for themselves. I'm not saying that Carlos would have done that, but I've heard the same story many times before. When we sat and talked with them, there was something that Carlos said that was burnt into my heart. He said, "Because you came and because of this house, I don't need to go to the US anymore. A family now able to stay together." I can tell you many more stories like this one, of the young family who operates the local bakery and are expecting their first child. They work from early in the morning until late at night and have what one shelter team member described as one of the worst houses I've ever seen. I can tell you many more stories like this, but I don't want to tell you any more stories. Instead, I want to invite you to help write a new story for a family that we haven't met yet. Of course, you can always donate towards houses for these families, but I'd like you to join me on a trip so that you can see for yourself and share the joy. You'll never understand the impact you can have until you've been there, worked alongside them, and shared this experience. So will you join me? With your help, we can write a better story for some families in need.